I want to introduce you for just a moment to another audacious entity, and that is the Bureau of Land Management. That's right. That's where we come in with the booze. The Bureau of Land Management, established in '46, and I want to, by the way, introduce the BLM through the eyes of Federal District Judge Robert C. Jones, who was in a district court in the state of Nevada. Robert C. Jones heard the cases that were in the Wayne Hage case. Anybody here heard of Wayne Hage? Yeah. The Wayne Hage case. Wayne Hage himself, a great patriot rancher, died about 3 years ago. But he lived long enough to hear Robert C. Jones excoriate heavily the BLM in that federal court. As a matter of fact, Wayne Hage had fought the BLM for several decades. And Robert C. Jones issued this statement to the BLM. He spanked him as hard as he could. He said basically this. He said somewhere in the late 1970s or the 1980s, I believe, the BLM has entered into a criminal conspiracy. Those are the words that he used. That has entered into a criminal conspiracy, conspiring to steal the rights, the property rights of the Hage family and other ranchers in the state of Nevada. Not only so, he said, but the actions of the BLM have been so unconstitutional, so lawless, ignoring the rule of law, ignoring former court cases. He said that it shocks the conscience of this court, and that's saying a mouthful right there. He went on to suggest that the BLM be indicted at federal court under RICO laws. That would be federal racketeering laws. That's what Robert C. Jones stated in Nevada 4 years ago, 2012. It was a historic 104-page ruling. Ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly the issue that we are facing right now today. Because the BLM is unconstitutional, it's acting in unconstitutional fashions, it is changing the laws at their own whim, and they're running roughshod over private property owners. That's what the issue is. As a matter of fact, some people might say, well, what took place in Nevada in Robert C. Jones's courtroom is not indicative of all across the country, but that is false. As a matter of fact, when Robert C. Jones, the federal judge, issued that verdict and that excoriating statement, they had emissaries, that is lawyers, from Washington, D.C. fly all the way out to Nevada and sat there and had to take that statement from Robert C. Jones. It is not a local problem. And what we are seeing here at the Red River, Wichita, Wilbarger, and Clay counties is not a local problem. It is a federal government that is completely out of control. Amen. I've even heard some even elected officials, as well as many others, primarily funded by or moved by the mainstream media, make such statements as to suggest that it is actually the ranchers who are not paying their dues. They're not paying their rental fees. For example, Cliven Bundy. In the state of Nevada, I've heard some of our own elected officials say that Cliven Bundy did not pay his taxes and they are driving him off the federal land because of that. That is false. That is misinformation. That is malinformation. And it is a shame that the mainstream media and even elected officials will buy that line, hook, line, and sinker. That is not the case. In fact, in the state of Nevada, as well as most of the western states, those property rights are called split estate rights. That is to say that Cliven Bundy owned, bought, and paid for his own grazing rights. Yep. He has the water rights, the state owns the animals, and the federal government only has access to the mineral rights beneath the soil. But those facts escape even elected officials. As a matter of fact, what has been taking place is that the BLM has been changing the rules, changing the regulations, changing the law at their own whim, and telling people in flyover country, as they will put it, simply to lump it. That's what's going on. Now, I say that because what's taking place right here at the Red River is really no different, because it involves the same unconstitutional entity making up their own rules and regulations, changing regulations as they go along, and they ought to be, in the words of Robert Jones, a federal district judge, indicted on federal RICO laws. Let me say a word for a moment about the tactics that we have seen with the BLM. We're looking at not only the BLM, but other federal government entities. I'm going to quote now from Roy Elliker. I don't know if you've heard of Roy Elliker. He is a spokesperson for the National Wildlife Federation. And he spoke in the state of Oregon at a college in 1997. And I want you to listen carefully how he put it. He said, what we need to do, and he was speaking as a government employee, what we need to do is to regulate, and continue to pass laws that makes the rancher move that cow 7 and 8 times, and pretty soon they've lost their shirt. He said, that's how we gain victory. Now, did you note the word he used? I'm quoting him. He used the word victory. Victory is a word that is used when there is a battle afoot. And that is precisely how the BLM and other federal entities consider this to be. The problem is that so many Americans are unaware of it. But we need to be aware that this is a battle. It is a battle for freedom. And how about that ubiquitous EPA? The EPA was slapped down on more than one occasion at the federal Supreme Court level. As a matter of fact, in 2001, the BLM took a beating from the Supreme Court judges. They were trying to say, that is, the EPA was trying to say, that all navigable rivers included all the waters on the territory, period. And so the federal court said, absolutely not. You cannot rightly claim jurisdiction over all water because you have navigable rivers. And so they slapped them down in 2001. Then came the famous 2006 Rapinos decision. Once again, the EPA had gone back to the drawing board, and they came back and were slapped down again in a Supreme Court decision, the Rapinos decision. And once again, the federal judges stated that you are stretching everything beyond all reason to say that all waters come under your jurisdiction. And they sent them back. But you know, the EPA is funded by you and me. And so they have an endless amount of financing, apparently. And so they've come out within the last 2 or 3 years with what is called the connectivity theory. The connectivity theory is to say that all waters are connected. All waters, even in the prairie pothole, or even in a cow track, if you can lick water out of it, it's all connected, and therefore it all comes under federal jurisdiction. Ladies and gentlemen, this is tyranny, is what it amounts to. John Adams, second president of the United States, I wonder if he knew what tyranny was all about. He made this statement, and I want you to listen carefully to it. The moment the idea is admitted into society that private property is not as sacred as the laws of God, tyranny commences. Hear, hear. Private property must be considered private, or it is that we are in a tyrannical government. So stated John Adams. And let me just mention another federal judge in 1997 who gave us a little bit more definition on that tyranny. He said, private property, if it is to be private, that means not only do you own it, but that you have the full right to usage of it, disposal of it at your desire. And no one tells you what you can and cannot do on your property. That's what is involved in private property. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not tenants on a White House farm. That's not what this is going to be. And the BLM is way out of bounds with this one to claim 90,000 acres on the Red River. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to put the federal government back into the constitutional box that our founding fathers created for it.
Bravo! Bravo!
Bill Lockwood, my goodness. A little bit of passion there.
Thank you, Bill.
Pretty articulate. Sounds like you studied a little bit. That's what patriots and Americans are, folks. They take the time to read. They take the time to help. Speaking of which, my goodness, what a stage. I mean, a bunch of bikers showed up on a Harley and leather jackets, and my goodness, I'm overwhelmed. This is beautiful.
Amen.
Thank you so very much to everyone who's worked so hard. The Tea Party, our friends and the Texas State Militia, our friends in the back over here. I can't read your sign because I'm blind and I'm having what they call a sometimers moment. Anyway, I want to introduce to you our next speaker. After he speaks with his degree of passion, his band's going to join him. Doc Green is a host on the Raging Elephants Radio, who's a clear voice of what's going on. They're willing to ask the tough questions. They're willing to ask them to anyone. At the same time, they're motivated by love of neighbor. And we're very proud to have them here. And we're very proud to have the band here. And we want to thank him for his thoughts and words. Doc?
Thank you so much. We're going to do another tune for you here in a minute. I want to thank Holly Feely. You guys hear her. She fills in for me on a lot of Mondays. She is a true patriot. Let me tell you how she ended up on the radio. I have been to so many events where she was there with her kids, teaching them about democracy, teaching them about what it means to be in a representative republic. And I got to talk to her and I realized this woman is smart. She knows some stuff. So, plus the fact she's got a great silky voice. So we put her on Raging Elephants Radio. We've got Amy Hedke here. I can't even begin to list all the things that Amy has done for liberty in Texas. But my hat's off to you, Amy.